Today on Hidden Secrets, revealed live, decision certainty for owners, asset managers, and operators. The problem facing decision makers in the commercial real estate space is when bad decisions come back to haunt them. That's where Proposabid steps in. Proposabid operates as the CapEx decision layer for large property renovations. Meet the founder and CEO, RoDevia Brigham, the very first guest on HSRL. Let me reveal this hidden secret to you live right now. Yo, welcome.
Yeah, Sean. Can you hear me?
Welcome. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you
Fantastic.
hear me?
Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So today on HSRL, welcome, RoDevia. It's great to have you on. Glad we could find time to do this podcast today.
Yes.
We met a while back, and I'm so glad that we got a chance to meet and hang out. So why don't we just get into it? And
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you can clarify this for me. Proposabid is the decision infrastructure for high stakes property renovations. Would that be an accurate description?
That's an accurate description based on, the knowledge base that we currently are setting with. This isn't just for, remodels or rehabs. This is for construction as a whole. So the question that people usually have is, what problem do we solve, right? And the first problem is that people approve repair or renovation budgets without the work being clearly defined, right? So everyone thinks they agreed on something, but they didn't. So most rehabs, renovations, and construction risks are created within the construction period. It's created at the moment that the capital decision is approved without enough definition behind them. So that's the first problem that is in Proposabid's realm. And the second problem is when folks try to get bids, the proposals don't match.
The
So
proposed
they're
don't
not
match?
the proposals or the estimations, the proposals from the vendors, the contractors do not match. They're answering the scope if you had a scope, but each answer is dependent on each individual vendor. So they're not really comparing options. They're comparing the guessing that the vendor actually did on the scope, on the RFP that was sent out. So for that second issue, we bring structure to that decision, and we standardize the inputs so the capital is committed based on something that's durable, not on assumptions that were made in the previous discussion before the capital was moved. So what Proposabid does is that we make the scopes clear and the bids truly comparable so that the decisions that were created previously actually hold up once the work starts, while the work is going, and at the post-mortem. Because usually you don't have the approval artifacts, but you do have the construction that's standing there with the list of questions on why did we go over budget, why isn't the vendor on time, why is the materials being appropriated correctly, or whatever the questions may be. So hopefully that's a high level answer to what Proposabid does.
I bet there's a lot of people that go off budget. They end up trying to figure out why they're so off budget from where they thought they were supposed to be.
Well,
And then
yeah,
they
they
have to
they
look
do.
at
Mhm, mhm.
so then they're looking at their
Go ahead.
proposals and stuff and trying to figure it out or talking to the construction guys. Uh,
Yeah, so what typically happens is that the decisions that a capital is committed is usually under the uncertainty of what's being proposed. So when you have property owners and leadership going back to the vendors or the crew, they're not actually starting at the place that the decisions were actually made, which was probably though. That was at the board table. That was in the closed room meetings. That was with the teams. And that was with the proposal committee and the capital approval committee that went ahead and approved the capital to be moved in the first place. So starting at the construction phase is actually a symptom. It's not the place where the decisions were made, because the construction and the execution only happens after the decisions. So if you're going back to the construction phase, you're not going back to the artifact phase.
the artifact phase, could you clarify what that means for me? Because I'm not the smartest tool on the sharpest tool in the shed. So what do you mean by
Right.
what's the artifact phase?
So artifact phase is a decision, right? And a decision is an artifact that must survive handoffs, right? So buyers, lenders, and asset managers, auditors inherent assumptions, right? And so if they cannot understand or defend them, the risk is embedded at the moment of approval. So the artifact phase is the actual moment that the approval was made, right? And most people don't
Got
understand
it.
what they're making at the moment of approval, and none of that is actually documented. So,
Got it.
mhm,
None of that is
yeah,
documented. Um, so do they realize this is this undocumentation and like is a problem? Like at what point do they say, "Hey, wait a minute, these
correct.
artifacts
Yeah.
are all
Mhm,
unaccounted for. What do we do?"
mhm, mhm.
Is that a typical
Yeah.
scenario?
So people usually do memos, right? They have in-person conversations, right? They have email threads. They have decision frameworks that don't actually hold up. And the same people that are in those conversations might not be there in 2 to 3 years or even 6 months from now, right? So basically, the documentation is based on institutional memory, and we know institutional memory is thin. So if you don't have, let me give you an example. If you don't have the the structure for the decisions that were made based on the um, the assumptions, right, or the risk that you're taking by not having a scope produced in the first place, but you're gonna, for example, you're going to allocate monies to scopes that weren't produced in the first place, and you're not going to actually allocate the actual money to particular parts of the project. This is all verbal communication. There's nothing that is being documented or written down, so that when an auditor comes 18 months from now and wants to do the reconstruction of why these decisions were made to allocate that money in the first place, there's nothing to actually look back on. And who you have to, and where people are looking back is in actual individuals that may or may not be there and with memory. So those artifacts and that documentation can be done with databases. It can be done with our particular software that we have to help clients be able to formulate the decisions that they're making before the capital is actually moved, so that when auditors come in, they don't actually need people to be able to reconstruct why the allocations were made, because what they have is actual exposure to the decisions that were created, regardless of who is there or not. And so that's something that Proposabid has seen quite a bit in these stages of, for instance, I was just talking with another podcaster. He said, well, what benefit do I have? I just go out and I choose, the best bid. I said, well, what were the other 2 to 3 bids lacking that you actually chose this particular bid? And he was fundraising funds to be able to do a new remodel somewhere out in Utah. And I said, when the investors ask you, well, what was going on with these other 3 bids, or what was the procedure in order for you to ask for this money in the first place? What was the thought process and decisions to ask for this particular money in the first place? And you're not
He didn't have an
around.
answer.
He did not have an answer.
Right.
And just about the majority of people that I speak with really don't have an answer as to why they're making the decisions that they're making, because they're only looking at the bids themselves. And the bids are variants. They have
The bids are
variables,
variants.
right? They have
Okay.
variables,
There's a
right?
lot of
So
variables with these bids.
right. So when you're looking at bids, you're looking at pricing. Ultimately, you're not necessarily looking at you're not necessarily looking at the decisions. The bids themselves cannot tell you why you're making the decision that you're making. They're only telling you what it is that they're answering for that particular scope that was written, if the scope was written, and if the scope was written correctly. So that also goes back to, why did you write the scope the way you wrote it? Why didn't you choose another scope? Because those are the kind of bids that you're going to receive based on the scope that you actually circulated out in public. And
so these guys have the scope of work that they don't have, that isn't articulated or not well thought out. Or
it depends on the industry. Like the property management industry, they don't do scopes of work because they just don't have the resources, or the client, they don't have the resources for that. So when Proposabid first started, we started in property management, like the John Stewart Company, FPI Management. And what we did was create customized scopes of work to be able to source the vendors on the property's behalf, because property management companies don't do scopes of work. They just call vendors. They have their on-site staff call vendors, and hopefully they get a bid within 30 days, maybe 2 that don't match up. If you're with a construction building company or some other industry, might be insurance, they may have scopes, but these scopes may or may not be as detailed. For instance, I did work for the Archdiocese in San Jose, and I spoke with the facilities director, and she said, well, I have my guy go on site, he puts in some information, I throw it into this program, it spits out a scope. But when they look at the scope that I did for them, that Proposabid did for them for a lobby remodel, they were like, this is way more information than we would have ever thought of. And I actually like the way you guys generated the scope, because it's based on the budget, the timeline, the materials, the decisions that we made before we actually allocated the money, because we placed the decision framework. And then from there, the bids came in very direct to the scopes. And then we actually had to actually redo the scope, because they wanted architectural drawings with the bids and estimations, and of course the vendors weren't going to do that. So scopes can be very thin. And if the scope is thin, and then you go back to the vendor and say, why doesn't it match the scope? Well, it actually does match the scope. This is what we agreed upon. The scope is thin. This is how you wrote it. These are the terms, the conditions, the exclusions. This is the material. This is the dimensions. This is the budget. But who's writing that scope? And the industry, the real estate industry, definitely has an idea that it's the vendor that writes the scope, when it should be the property or the property owner, or at least that side of the property, that writes the RFP, the scope, based on the decisions that they're making before the scope is even written in the first place. But that doesn't happen. That part doesn't happen. I just talked a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like
I'm not even on a podcast. I'm not gonna.
I love it. No, that's the vibe. I'm interested in getting these details out from you. But so it sounds like these decision frameworks, like, this is how I put it, because I have like an artist sort of background, and I think of it as this white space that was just sitting there, and you saw this opportunity to where like these property managers don't even do these scopes of work, and you're like, what? Would that be any anything similar to what happened? Is this opportunity that you found to build these decision frameworks for the commercial real estate industry? Is that right?
Yeah, so I started out with a couple of properties in property management, and I said, well, if I have 2 or 3 people that are having this portfolio managers, right, or on-site management staff that's having these particular issues, and then you have about 30, 40,000 property management companies in the United States, they are all going through the same thing because they're all looking for bids and estimations for property repairs. And as we operate as an independent decision infrastructure, we do it for institutional real estate and single family residencies too, for the repair and renovations. Basically, we're working upstream where the capital assumptions are defined first, because assumptions can only roll downhill. They roll into the scope and they roll into the construction, and they roll into the postmortem, and then 18 months later, right? So where the capital assumptions are defined, where they're evaluated and relied upon during either underwriting or due diligence or post-close review. So just to be clear, we do not manage construction or execution. We only provide a place for real estate to be able to define their assumptions, their risks, their allocations in a very clear format before they go ahead and move that money around. And so, yes, to answer your question, it's something that is perpetuated throughout the real estate industry because there is no platform or infrastructure in place to where CapEx is thought about before the money is actually moved. Yes, there's conversations. Yes, this is where we're going to allocate the money. Yes, these are the time frames. But all of those things are expectations, not frameworks.
Oh, okay.
They're expectations, right? Those are expectations.
That's crazy.
Those aren't actually decision framework and expectations are two different things. Yes, because expectations means that you don't really have a context, right? You have context, but the contexts aren't hard coded. Versus expectations can float around with uncertainty, right?
Yeah, big time.
If you expect something, that leaves room for disappointment. Versus decision frameworks, it's documented, it's hard coded, and this is what we can refer back to. You can't refer back to expectations, may it be in a relationship, may it be with your health. It's like, this is what we wanted to happen, but this isn't how it happened. Well, what were the hard coded decisions that were made, right? Almost like, what were the goals, and did we meet those? Did we hard code those particular goals? So a lot of folks think that a decision, that the decisions are actually made at the contractor level, but the decisions is not necessarily at the moment that you choose a contractor. It's a decision is what's defining what is being actually trusted. Now, that's not meaning trusted in like who your favorite vendor is and you just constantly go with them. Because contractor selection is actually downstream. Because the real decisions is agreeing on what work exists, what it should cost, and why the belief is actually reasonable. So all that happens way upstream, right? And construction doesn't determine it doesn't determine the outcomes. It operates within, construction operates within clarity or the ambiguity that was created and is produced much earlier, right? So if you have change orders, those change orders only came about not during the construction, but what was produced in the ambiguity around the decisions that were made to go with the type of construction that you were going to do in the first place. So
Yeah.
there's so many directions that I could kind of talk in this, but go ahead.
So
Yeah.
that ambiguity is what drives up the CapEx, I guess. That's the assumption I have.
Well,
Like these costs are like out of hand.
no, ambiguity doesn't drive up the CapEx.
No? Okay.
Ambiguity creates the environment for uncertainty around why the choices were made in the first place. So ambiguity shows up later on in the complete project, not just the cost itself. So if you just put ambiguity just with the pricing, that's incorrect, because ambiguity can also go with why we couldn't get refinanced, right?
Right.
Or why the property was red taped for whatever reason, 12 months from now, 6 months from now, 3 weeks from now. And ambiguity exists within the actual people involved before the money was moved and the decisions were made to start the construction or the remodel or the rehab or the repair in the beginning. How much time do we have?
Well, I don't want to take up all of your day, but yeah. This is the first time we've had a guest on HSRL. To make a long story short, I think this season we'll do it more. But so I'm interested in finding out, learning. It's kind of selfish because I can learn so much this way. But because you're so analytical, so that's one of the things that I like about you is you have a very analytical mind. From my, as far as I can tell, is your background in cybersecurity and as a firefighter?
Yeah, I started out as a firefighter with U.S. Forest Service in 1999. In a small town called Mount Shasta, California, near the Oregon border. Went to school at College of the Siskiyous. Fought fires for about a decade. And the contrast there is that I started to feel like I wasn't using my mind. And I'm very analytical as far as like just asking questions and being curious about things. Why are things the way they are? And as my body started to, even at 20, 21, 22 years old in the fire service, my body started to age, started to feel the aches and pains, got out of that and then went into some IT, started there, went into cybersecurity, and had a shower moment where much later, about a decade later, had a shower moment where I asked my partner if she could automate anything, what would it be? And she said, if I could just get vendors to pick up the phone, answer emails, give me 3 bids that are apples to apples, or at least not even apples to apples, just 3 bids. So I could submit them to ownership so they could make a financially relevant decision, that would be great. And I said, how hard could that be? And so about 4 years later, here we are with Proposabid. And honestly, it's more about just I'm very curious about the decisions that people make. So when Proposabid started, we started with, of course I could get the bids. So we built the tools for that. So we were able to do an intake on properties, create customized RFPs, source those, market those RFPs across the nation. Bids would come back from local vendors. We would aggregate those bids apples to apples using, some AI and bots and things like that from accredited, certified vendors, and then take those bids, make them palpable for on-site staff and ownership to be able to read and make a educated decision on. And currently, Proposabid is able to source an average 7 bids per project. That's remodel, rehabs, property renovations, general repairs. And so because we're able to source 7 bids within 14 business days, that just isn't done in the industry. As a matter of fact, the industry doesn't have a benchmark, and Proposabid just said it.
Right.
The benchmark is typically maybe we'll get 2 bids in the next 30 days. They may average, they may be in budget, but the terms and pricing is off, and it doesn't address anything in the scope. But once again, the scope does not have the robust decision framework built into it because the teams aren't thinking in that particular format and frame line. And so once we perfected that, we said, okay, so why did you choose the bid that you chose? Client after client after client could not tell me why they chose the bid that they chose. Well, why didn't you choose the other bid? Sometimes it was pricing. Like they would look at the price. It was $212,000, right, versus the $157,000 budget that they were in. So that was automatic disqualification for them based on pricing. But you got premium materials, you got extended warranties, you received excellent terms and conditions, but you went with another bid that was cheaper, but didn't necessarily meet the scope. So what was the decision around that? And this is on-site staff. It's a new PM that was just promoted 6 months ago, right? On-site staff might be maintenance guy. He just graduated with his HVAC. Nobody has time. Ain't nobody got time for that. They don't have time to figure out how to do comparable decision-making on bids and estimations. As a matter of fact, they just send it up to ownership, and then ownership pushes it back down to the portfolio manager. And because we were able to pull out the comparable terms and conditions, exceptions, the materials, the costs, the time frame, because we were able to do such a detailed comparison of that, all of our clients came back and said, well, because you did a detailed comparison, we had a better idea of what we wanted to go with. But remember, this is at the point of the bids and estimations themselves. This isn't necessarily about what the teams actually agreed upon to begin with, before the project even got talked about or started or they contacted me. So Proposabid definitely handles the second part, which is the tools, right? So we're able to produce structured scopes, standardized bids, and defensible estimations that support the assumptions that were created before we contacted the vendors, right? And so since we do operate at the independent decision infrastructure layer, we are able to help our clients come up with the best frameworks for their situations, for their companies, so that property owners have more resources to be able to come back and do, if they need to do a necessary reconstruction on why they chose the bids that they chose in the first place, especially if they do run over 18% over their budget. We can't guarantee that you're not going to run 18% over your budget, but we can guarantee that you will be able to trace back the decisions that were made so that you can see why you're running over 18% of your budget, or the contractors delayed 6.5 weeks, or you weren't able to get that refinancing, or can't push that refinancing clock back, or whatever the case may be, that you have the documentation and the thought processes behind the decisions that you made, which actually saves people quite a bit of time in the long run. And a lot of folks are like, well, that's great and all, RoDevia, but then that exposes me, right? Nobody wants exposure. It's like, well, actually, it could save you quite a bit of time, because if you're an operator that comes to, an insurance broker, for instance, and you ask for $6 million to do a rebuild or something like that, and you come to them and you say, well, I don't quite have a scope. We have an idea. We're not sure where we want to allocate the money at. But it's time that we actually do this thing. We do have some ideas. And then what is the risk that's being taken on, and what are the assumptions? Is the insurance folks going to actually take that on? They're going to cut that check. 36 months are going to pass. The operator that asked for that $6 million is now, 15% over budget. Leadership is upset. They're asking questions, and the operator can't answer why they're over budget and why things aren't getting done, when actually it's the folks that cut the check, which is the insurance, when they never should have cut the check in the first place, because they should have required that there be a scope, that you get some vendors lined up, right? You get you figure out where you kind of want to allocate this money. But it was the risk and the assumptions that the insurance folks took on in the beginning that created this downward mess, for the lack of a better word. So it's not the operator anymore. Like, hey, you gave me the money. I told you what it was. We don't have anything set up, so of course we're going to go over, because nothing's been allocated correctly, and you're the one that cut the check. Now, of course, I'm saying it like this with you, but these are things that I've witnessed. And so, of course, the insurance folks are like, well, we didn't have a framework. We didn't know what decisions we were making. We didn't know what assumptions we were defining. We didn't know what we were actually evaluating. It's their money, so we kind of cut the check, and we expected for them to go ahead and get it done and stay within budget.
That's wild.
That's a high level.
Yeah.
That's a high level. And it happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
I bet, and people probably don't question it, or by the time they do, who knows? I don't know.
By the time they do, it's too late. By the time they do, I actually do have one that I can actually kind of give you I call it after it's over.
You're cutting out a little bit. Are you still there? I think I lost my guess, ladies and gentlemen.
And this
Hello?
is pretty standard. Projects start like this, right? You got an approval phase, you got the construction phase, right? And
Okay.
the project has already been delivered. So you got approval, construction, and completed. Now the project has already been delivered, right? The units are leased, financial performance is being measured now, and the most completion review has been scheduled to understand, what is the variance between what was approved, the expectations, and what's actually happened. So from what's happening now versus the original plan. And so most available records come from the actual construction phase, right? And the phases, the change logs, the invoices, the schedules, the closeout documentation. And so the materials from the original authorization are limited as like summaries or exhibits or brief approval language, right? Those closed door meetings. And then some of the individuals involved in early planning are no longer there. So in the construction phase, They built it. They built what they needed to build. But when it was completed, the final cost was 16% versus the actual plan. It is delivered and occupied. The contractor paid in full. The timeline extended by 15 weeks, and now the actual build is stabilizing. And so the difference between the approval phase and the completed phase is that in the post-mortem, what we call a post-mortem review, the typical questions that are asked is why the project exceeded its initial budget, right? Like you said, whether the execution was properly controlled, which most people can't answer. What should be reported to the stakeholders about the actual variances, and how to evaluate similar investments going forward, because we're always trying to figure out how not to go over. And so in the approval phase, we typically have like the original assumptions are not retained. The scope comparisons are summarized verbally because most people don't have a place to actually store those actual comparisons. And then there's market justification that's kind of made broadly, and then the people who made the decisions at the approval are no longer present. So the question typically is if the only fully preserved record is construction, then, and this is in general, if the only fully preserved record is the construction or the rehab, then what exactly is your reviews analyzing? Because they're typically not analyzing the approval phase, the decision phase, right? And so, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, they're not analyzing the approval phase. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they're not necessarily analyzing the approval phase, which is the scope comparisons. How did they come to the review of the particular scopes, right? What were the original assumptions and risks that so the risk was, if we go with, for instance, you have a building, it's got dry rot. You have a building, the roof is leaking, residents are complaining, they tear open the roof, they see that the leak is going down the side of the building, now it's dry rot. So they have 3 good bids, right? They had 3 bids. And the bids could be, one could be comparable, the other one could be a little costly, and the other one could be a low bid. So what are you actually comparing? Let's assume that you're actually comparing, do we do a full rehab on this building and spend more money? Or do we select for that bid? Or do we do a plug and play, right? Basically, we're just going to plug this thing up and play it out, do the lowest cost, and then we'll just deal with it months from now because we already got a lawsuit because we got black mold and the baby's in the hospital and we got 2 other residents that are suing us, and the list goes on. So the approval phase, all those conversations, all those decisions, right? Those decisions before we actually went ahead and sourced the vendors are not documented.
Right.
Or maybe, and if somebody on this call, on this video is like, I'm documenting everything, I want to talk to you. I want to see how you do that. Consistently, consistently every single, I'm not saying no one's doing this, I'm saying industry-wide on a platform that anybody could log into and see what what the framework was. So back to the dry rot, the mold, the leaky roof, right? So if none of that's being documented, because there are conversations with the property management company, there are conversations with the inspector that came down, maybe your on-site staff is taking a couple of notes, the same people aren't there anymore. If the only fully preserved record is the construction, and the construction was that they went with the plug and play, not the full remodel. Mm-hmm. What exactly is being reviewed and analyzed, because the only thing that remains is the construction and maybe the bids.
I
Right?
don't know what.
Yeah, so I'm not going to answer that particular thing, because what's so basically what's being reviewed is the only thing that you can see, which is the construction itself and all the problems that come down with that, and the contractors that maybe didn't do the contractors that timeline went over for 12 weeks, right? And the fact that it's no longer deliverable and part of it is not occupied anymore, right? Only the things that we can see are the things that we actually blame, versus the institutional memory on why we made the decisions that we made, because you can't blame that.
Right. It sounds like what you're saying is you can't really blame the invisible things that
If it's
no one
not visible,
kept track of.
if it's not
You
written,
blame the
then it doesn't
physical things.
exist.
Yeah,
Yeah, if it's not written, it doesn't
totally.
exist. If the documentation is not there, and not just a two paragraph memo, because even that's going to be that's not going to cut it for the decision framework.
So it sounds like you're seeing the same pattern of preventable failure showing up in real estate.
Oh, it's everywhere, because
It's
the
everywhere.
decisions, yeah, the decisions are the first. Before you actually do execution, you have to have a decision to begin with.
Yeah, you would think someone would think of that already. So I
Well,
think
that's what I'm here for.
that's exactly what you're here for. But one of the first questions someone might have
Sure.
is we're in the zeitgeist of AI. So automation is core
Hmm.
to the use of AI. So based on our conversation, how important is the human connection around AI?
Mm.
In
Yeah,
other
we
words,
talked about this. Hmm.
yeah, because people are going to want to know, like, what's is Proposabid going to get replaced by something like some startup out of Y Combinator?
Yeah, so I actually did go to a couple of speaking of Y Combinator, I've actually been to a couple of their meetings. They're right downtown San Francisco. For the human touch, I just saw something yesterday, and we're probably 18 months from not being able to decipher what's real and what isn't. So there's that. Um, for AI and automation, Proposabid is definitely, in that lane of automating everything. So that way it frees up the time and space for owners and operators, asset managers, investors, and the industry itself can get on with the things that really are important to them, versus figuring out the bids and estimations process. And with the human touch, I would say, because Proposabid works on two sides of the platform. The first side is the property side and everything that goes along with that. On-site staff, ownership, property management companies, um, asset managers, CEOs, like for and VPs, directors for like Graystar and other um, corporations like that. And then you have the vendor side, and that is very hands-on. That is something that has to be stabilized. And this industry is in a peril when it comes to the vendor-owner relationship. What I found is that what Proposabid does helps the industry in a way that no other industry has. And what I mean by that is that we are able to not only give our vendors the opportunity to be able to submit high quality apples to scope apples to scope bids. But we also give our vendors the opportunity to have warm leads, because we guarantee that those bids and estimations will be put in front of the property owner, and the property handlers themselves, maybe the property management company, the staff. And with that, they also get a response on how they matched up to the scope of work and to other vendors that submitted. So vendors, when I first started interacting with vendors, they're like, yeah, we don't deal with third party, we're not interested in this, it's too much competition. I said, well, would you have heard about this lobby refresh if I didn't contact you in the first place? Well, no. Okay, so tell you what, do me a solid. Here's a scope. Submit if you want. If you do, let me know. Well, you'll have to submit to Proposabid, so I'll know. I said, but I guarantee you, for every bid that you submit, you will receive follow-up and feedback. I said, are any of your high-value owners giving you feedback when you submit bids and estimations? No, they're not. And so if every project is receiving 7 bids, average 7 bids, that means that there's 7 businesses, 7 owners, 7 families, and 7 businesses that have to supply food, housing, they're basically taking care of other employees, then now you get a warm lead. And so when my vendors understand this, they have no problem spending the time doing high quality, what I find like nice PowerPoints. I'm trying to figure out who their PowerPoint person is. They can do my PowerPoints. They're submitting all these really nice bids. They're very comparable. And so they don't have a problem submitting bids and estimations to Proposabid on behalf of the project itself, versus feeling like they need to hoard or keep close to the chest their property owners because they're too worried about not winning. And so when it comes to AI, I don't think that that particular piece is going to be replaced, because that's personal.
Mm-hmm.
When you're talking to a man and he has a family, and he's got a family to feed, and he has workers that he needs to feed, he has office staff, and you're talking to him about, well, do you want more RFPs so that you can submit to this so that you can win? And now you don't have to door knock, at least not on my watch. And they get it, and they're grateful, and I'm grateful for them. So that's a long answer. This is part of the reason why Proposabid is the way that's why I built it the way I did, because it's 2 sides of the coin, the same
Mm-hmm.
folks. Everybody's trying to figure out how to win more and how to get more high quality bids so that they can make financially relevant decisions. And Proposabid doesn't, have coveted. Somebody was suggesting, why don't you, when there's a change order, why don't you tell them that they have to go through you? I don't have time for change orders. We're preventing. The platform is to reduce change orders, not jump in every time a change order is made. We don't have the time and the resources for that. And so with our vendors, we tell our owners, if you find that you like this particular vendor, this GC that you picked from the high quality bids and estimations that we were able to submit to you, and you want him on all your properties, go for it. That's what we're here for. We want people to be able to eat and to be able to have a ROI. And just let me know. Let me know. Hey, you picked Sean's roofing because Sean does all your roofing now for your REITs. That's awesome. Let's talk about it. Let's jump on a podcast. Let's jump on a meeting. Tell me about all the fantastic things that you have done because you were able to get sourced through Proposabid, because that's what we're here for.
That's great.
So yeah, I'm really proud of the thought process, because it took me 3 years to really sit down and just think. Obviously, that's what I do. It's like, how can I have both sides win? And it's not about me, because it's not.
That's a very good answer. That's a very good answer, because it kind of makes you realize that the likely scenario isn't that people lose jobs with AI. It's that we have just an increase of all kinds of uh, of productivity and more. You know, uh, Mark Andreessen said that the job, and it was the first time I heard it put this way, but the job is just a bundle of tasks. And what AI is doing is just making all of these tasks just so much more efficient, and we're being more productive. So, why not?
Yeah, and I just finished reading a book called the Five Resets. I forget who the doctor's name is, and it wasn't for somebody else. It might have been high level, but for me, what it honed in was the basics. Is that there's two types of happiness, and for the lack of remembering, the first one I'm just going to call it hedonistic. It's hedonics. I think it's hedonics. The first one is hedonics. And hedonics is, you had a hard day, you go out, not that I would do this, but you go out and then you go shopping and you buy a Coach bag and that lasts for like 2 weeks and it's just another bag, right? Or you go to the movies and it just lasts for a couple of days. It's things that are generated outside of yourself, right? It's not self-generating.
Mhm.
And then the second piece was something, and maybe the audience would know, is eudaimonics, something like that. Uni. That's what I remember. And when he first said that, I was like, oh, so inclusion of more than one, including a unit, and those things. That type of happiness is you do what brings you purpose and meaning. And I am not sure how, and that's the kind of happiness that I enjoy. I like hard stuff. I don't know
Mhm.
why, but and I played rugby for like 10 years and I made it out alive. Like got all my teeth, no broken bones. And those are hard things. And it's a group activity. Like you can't do rugby on your own. And so I like that kind of happiness. And it could be a walk in the park. It could be, getting out in nature. It could be, and that's what those are the things that I like to do, or donating blood, or visiting the pet SPCA, volunteering, things like that. But mainly, it is to have purpose. And so I'm not sure if AI, what you mentioned was the tasks piece, and I look at the task piece as hedonics.
Really?
Just
In what way? Because we're getting, I mean, besides creating goofy videos with people in bikinis, I'm thinking of like the actual like agents that are doing all the spreadsheet work that we used to have to do with Excel, and they're going and doing, and the open clause going out and trading meme
Yeah. Do
coins or
they?
whatever is going on. I don't know.
Does it
So I
have
guess
meaning
some
though?
of that is some of it does and some of it doesn't.
hmm
It's hard to distinguish. Uh,
Yeah. So yeah, it's the reason why I say I look at hedonics, and this answer may change tomorrow, depending on how much education I get and how AI changes. As of today, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, after reading and after what you just said on the task piece, I look at the task piece as hedonics because there's singular things. They do build into something more meaningful, depending on how you programmed it to begin with, the decisions that were made. You just gonna let it run rapid, or are you gonna program it with a decision framework? Because that's what AI is kind of built on, right? Is decisions. And then can that build into more meaningful, um, more holistic frameworks later on? So I'm not here to debate. I am not an AI debater at all. I'm trying to figure out how to exit so I can just avoid getting ran over by by the bots, right? I'm trying to be in Mount Shasta in my bunker somewhere in 5 years.
Okay.
With my hydroponic plants, because
Ah,
who knows?
hydroponic plants.
No, not weed plants, like just like growing plants underground or in the
Okay.
yeah. So I'm doing the best that I can with my thought process around trying to help the real estate industry unload the cognitive load that they currently have, that they don't know that they have, that transfers downhill, and make some good connections along the way, and have the real estate industry, especially between the owners and the vendors, have a great connection that it's harmonious, more harmonious than it is now, and people have a very clear understanding on what they're doing with their capital funding, so that way when there is execution and when there is construction, people can look back, especially on the ownership side, and say, oh, this is why things went the way they went, and we can learn from it, versus calling a meeting and people are pointing fingers, because emotional allocation is easier and it's more familiar than actually taking a look at the structure and the system that isn't in place in the first place.
RoDevia, what movie, TV, or book character is most like you and
Hmm.
why?
Oh yeah. So I'd probably say The Long Walk by Stephen King. But from what I from what I understand, the real story isn't about the walking. It's about, and I'm currently going through this, and this is kind of how I live. It's about the endurance of pressure, the psychological isolation, and I feel that especially doing this work in the fire service, it was psychological isolation. Long horizon survival. That's definitely in the fire service, and it's definitely in this work that I'm doing with Proposabid currently. Because this isn't baking cookies, or having sales or short sales cycles or anything like that. I think the other piece is the internal discipline when external conditions are hostile, which is something that I'm definitely focused on.
Hostile conditions?
Uh, Hostile, yeah, external hostile conditions, yeah, yeah. Um, and we've talked offline, and I'm dry, so I appreciate you understanding a little bit about what I got going on. And I think the last piece is probably the winning by not stopping. And so the story is really about, for me, endurance. I think if anybody's read the book, and if they've seen the movie, they would understand that little piece. But I think it's also about staying steady when the pressure is constant. And most people quit. They try something else. So I relate to the long-term discipline more than short bursts of an intensity, and that can look very boring. And I would prefer that than the dopamine drips and the dopamine hits. I need the long grueling, the uncertainty of it all, but to have the framework so that I can look back years from now and have something to say, this is why I'm where I'm at. So I'd say the long walk.
The Long Walk. I haven't. I need to read that. I have not read it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you don't read it, then
The
I
Long
don't think
Walk.
it's in the theaters anymore. The Long Walk by Stephen King. It's one of his first books that he novels. Don't quote me. That he ever wrote, and it was written. He wrote it in a hotel. You know what? Don't let me. Don't let. I don't know if this is true. You don't know what you get off the internet, but it is one of his original books that he wrote. One of his first
Yeah, good
ones.
enough. Anything else? Anything else that is important to you that people know about Proposabid, or how they can find you, or
Yeah.
anything that's important to you?
Yeah. If you're interested in having a chat, having us take a look at what you currently got going on. Maybe you're in the beginning of a project, thinking about doing a project. You got some really sloppy bids out there. You're not sure what you're looking at, and you can contact me at RoDevia at Proposabid. That's RoDevia at Proposabid.com. Our website is Proposabid, Proposabid.com, and you can take a look. Um, yeah, so basically, I love chatting about decisions and like why are we where we are at? What do you want to get out of this thing? How do you want to see this months from now? And if you're just interested in us sourcing the bids and estimations for you, we can do that too, and we do that exceptionally, I like to say. Exceptionally well.
Exceptionally well.
Exceptionally well. And yes, please feel free to reach out anytime. I appreciate you, John.
The pleasure's all mine. All right, should we wrap it up?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. That's our time. We got to get back to work, ladies and gentlemen. Share this, retweet on X, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. You're allowed to make fun of me. I don't know about RoDevia, but you're allowed to make fun of me. Only if your jokes are funny, you get my name right. Visit my X profile to learn more. Also, check out Proposabid if you're in the commercial real estate space. And
Thank you.
I'm going to let her go back to work, and then I'm going to tell you guys about a couple things before I let you go. So thank you very much, RoDevia, for coming on today. I really appreciate you.
It's been my pleasure.
All right. So I invite you to team up with me, bring about serious advancement for each other. The plan for our community is to share with each other the systems, the processes, the workflows that we are successfully using in order to help each other grow. It's not a cult, but have you ever felt that deep, powerful sense of belonging that transforms your entire perspective? That's what awaits you in our community. As you hear me talking now, you might begin to imagine yourself surrounded by like-minded individuals who truly understand your aspirations. Picture yourself waking up each morning with renewed purpose, knowing you're part of something greater than yourself. Your future self is already thanking you for taking this step today. The door is open, and all you need to do is walk through it. That's why I invite you to belong higher. Join us on Telegram. The official source for this show is safenemedia.com/HSRL. And you can get into the Telegram. There's a link to it at the top of the Safe New Media X profile. Follow Safe New Media on X. I want to give loyal listeners of this podcast something. Free gift for you. If you want to start a podcast but feel imposter syndrome, you can now get your copy of the Anti-Imposter Podcast Starter Kit at safenew.media. What I'm about to tell you next will shock you.
This is not an offer, solicitation of an offer to buy or sell securities. Past performance is not an indication of future results. Investing involves risk and may result in partial or total loss. Prospective investors should carefully consider investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses, and should consult with a tax or legal advisor before making any investment.
Before making any investment decision, always do your own research. This is not financial advice. Today, owning a home now costs $52K more per year than renting. Families are stuck as forever renters. We're seizing the shift, buying 100 plus unit assets in growth markets. Few get in. Why? We don't need more money. We're looking for investors aligned with our values. We're improving quality of life at scale for hardworking families. Secure your place on our waitlist. Go to Inveresta.com. You can now subscribe to our newsletter. That secures your place. You can now receive your free guide. It's called Location Science 2026, 5 filters to find growth markets for multifamily real estate. Don't ignore the data before you invest. When you subscribe, you secure your place on our waitlist for the next opportunity. Most real estate people tell you to invest in your backyard, which is great if your backyard is a good location with rising population growth and job growth. But what if your backyard is the wrong location? Avoid losing money in the wrong location. Hit me up on our X profile at Inveresta. Retail investors can send me a DM there to let me know what kind of investment opportunities you are looking for. Accredited investors can get in touch with me today. Call my office. Go to Inveresta.com. Accredited investors only. This is not an offer or solicitation to the general public. Last thing, before I let you go, Methods of Prosperity newsletter is for anyone who agrees that success leaves clues. You owe it to yourself to be rich. Society, our parents, teachers, and peers have conditioned us. They want us to be like them. They need us to comply. They need us to be conventional like they are. As Herb Kelleher, co-founder and CEO of Southwest Airlines, remarked, all the people that were telling me those things were expressing conventional wisdom. And if it's conventional, it ain't wisdom. And if it's wisdom, it ain't conventional. My name is Sean Allen Fenn, and I'm obsessed with prosperity. This is the natural state of the human spirit. It turns out there's no limit. There's also many variables. Some keep their day job. Others go all in. Some are entrepreneurs. Others are value investors, but all of them have a certain mindset. Understanding what makes them tick grants us insight into our own journey. Methods of Prosperity newsletter is for anyone who agrees that success leaves clues. It's the most popular newsletter to brainwash yourself rich. Go to safenewmedia.com/newsletter to subscribe to Methods of Prosperity. To become a billionaire, one must first be conditioned to think like a billionaire. You can now subscribe for free at safenewmedia.com/newsletter. Thanks for making this the most popular live stream at this hour on this subject. Broadcasting on X, formerly known as Twitter, Hidden Secrets Revealed Live is a production of Safe New Media, unconventional, diversified global digital media company devoted to the practice, administration, and the dissemination of the ideologies of its founder, moi. Yours truly, my name is Sean Allen Fenn, and this is definitely not a cult. I like you. But don't take my word for it. Decide for yourself.